Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Broomfield. Welcome to today's webinar on how to increase profit and improve cash flow with an automated rebate management solution. We're very pleased to welcome everyone, and we hope the next 45 minutes will be extremely valuable for you. The goal of today's webinar is to help you understand the opportunities to increase profit and improve cash flow through better rebate management. And during the discussion, we'll be illustrating how companies have achieved this. At the end of the session, there will be opportunities to ask questions through the question pane on your control panel. So I'm very pleased to introduce our presenters. We have Andrew Butt, who is the Managing Director and Co-founder of Enable, and Andrew Kerwin, who is the CEO of XL Vets. So in terms of today's agenda, what we'll be looking at is the common challenges that companies face with rebate management, what companies do at the moment, how DealTrack came about, and how DealTrack can address the challenges of rebate management. And then we'll have some great news from Andrew Kerwin at XL Vets. So with what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Andrew Butt, who will take you through the first part of the webinar. Andrew.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for that introduction. So in terms of the topic of rebate management, one of the things we found is there are many different words that are used, and people think of all sorts of different elements when we talk about it. So just to kind of orientate ourselves really, on the screen now, we can see some of the really kind of common topics that come up. So clearly, rebates is what this is about. We tend to find that many companies have an annual terms agreement, which might have many rebates in it and works on, say, a 12-monthly basis. We also find that they might have, say, special deals, which can be promotional, shorter-term deals that have rebates on them. The other thing is, although a lot of our focus tends to be on helping companies collect rebates from their suppliers, there's also the process, of course, of paying out rebates to customers. And you'll see the word contract support on there somewhere, which is really all about providing additional support to customers to help them sell your products. So really, all sorts of different concepts going on there. But we've done a lot of work within buying groups, distributors, wholesalers, and merchants, and others, but those seem to be the main ones, to really help companies to increase profit and improve cash flow with an automated rebate management system. So hopefully that just orientates us a little bit in terms of the types of topics we're going to be looking at today. So what we've now done is we've basically set out 8 common challenges and issues which we see coming up time and time again. 4 of those are on the screen right now. And just to talk these through, what we often find is very scary, of course, that companies actually miss rebates. They fail to claim 100% of the rebates which are due. And first of all, I don't think I've ever met anyone who believes that this is the case. People aren't coming to us, for example, saying that they think they're missing rebates. But I can tell you that in many cases where we've worked and implemented DealTrack, we have found missing rebates. And this tends to be because the complexity of the deals that people negotiate is so high that trying to model those in a system which can then make sure every penny is claimed is simply very difficult. So certainly an issue we find is this missed rebates. Cash flow is also a real challenge often when it comes to rebates, because we find that companies are often actually selling products below their cost price, and they're relying on rebate income to basically put them into profit. So given that typically rebates are claimed after a product has been purchased or even a sale has been made, there is a real kind of funding requirement to fund those rebates before they come in. And if it takes a few months or weeks between buying a product and paying for it and then claiming the rebates, then clearly cash flow can be a challenge. Top right-hand side, we're looking at profit visibility. So I've worked with and met a number of companies where they actually don't really know whether they're making a profit or not in any particular month. and they might believe they are, and then there can be a surprise, and they find out that they're not, or vice versa. And as it says, this is very dependent on accruals often. So really trying to actually run the business and make good decisions is really challenging if you can't see whether you're making a profit or not. And then the final one on this particular slide is missed opportunities. And what we mean by this is typically companies lack the tools they need to really see how they could drive their business, how they can increase sales, and how they could potentially earn more rebate. And of course, rebate tends to be there as an incentive to help companies sell more and to build mutual partnerships where the manufacturer can sell more and the distributor can sell more. So being able to see opportunities to do that is important. And I think also if without that, then there is definitely some missed opportunities. So moving on to these other kind of challenges. First of all, understanding the margin. Then because the actual profit margin often depends on what month it is, who the product is being sold to. It might depend on all sorts of different factors. Then trying to actually see what the profit margin is at any given time can be quite difficult. And trying to price products accordingly and be competitive when you're not sure what the profit margin is instantly is obviously not ideal. Also, in terms of supplier relationships, we often find that rebates are agreed in emails and it's not that clear what's been agreed. There's a lack of kind of clear contract, and that can create disputes. So we see regularly customers and suppliers having disagreements about what's been agreed and what rebate is due. So I think having poor supplier relationships is definitely one of the big issues that we can come up against. Financial compliance is really important, and we've seen in the news various companies that have failed to accrue correctly, and they might have over accrued for some of the promotional money, some of the rebates, and actually resulted in inflated profit, which of course is a big concern. So that's probably a growing and more recent issue. So I think what I've tried to do there is really just summarize initially what some of the main challenges are and what some of the main issues are that we've been coming up against over the past few years on this topic. And what I'd like to do now is just look at some of the current methods that we find are often in place. So paper-based systems have been around for many years and decades, and buyers have been kind of using paper and printed contracts and faxes and all this kind of thing to agree deals for a very long time. So that's certainly been around for ages. And we often see really kind of clever deals being negotiated and then filed away in a filing cabinet. So that's paper. Email, of course, now has, not just now, in fact, for the last 15 years or so, has allowed negotiations to go back and forth in email chains. And whilst that's very responsive, it often does mean that to try and actually work out what's been agreed, what types of deals and rebates have been agreed, you've got to go back through a very long email trail. It's often quite ambiguous. Emails are embedded in different people's inboxes. So when people leave, when a buyer leaves, for example, or a salesperson leaves, trying to actually work out what has been agreed by searching through their email is a real challenge. So that's one method. Microsoft Excel features quite heavily in companies and is certainly a good step up from paper and email. So I found a number of companies with quite clever Excel workbooks and macros and formulas to work out what the rebates are. But we all know that with Excel, it's very easy to make errors. And if we have one or two cells that are not included in a formula or one error in one cell, then literally millions of pounds of rebate can be missed. And again, we have actually come up against this. ERP systems. So we're finding now that most ERP systems like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics do have elements of rebate functionality, as you might expect. And again, those can work very well, but they tend to be quite focused on quite basic types of rebates and types of deals and quite basic deal mechanisms. So, for example, it might be a straight percentage. If you get 5% rebate on all purchases, then that's really quite simple, and ERP can accommodate that in many cases. Where it gets more complex and you get into value-based, volume-based, different units of measure, fully retrospective, waterfalls, stringing, all sorts of things that we'll talk through in a short while, then the ERP systems tend to not be able to meet those requirements. We find that there's a lot of approximation which goes on, and by this I mean that rebates are often calculated or let's say earned at the product level. So each product purchased in each month from each supplier for each branch earns a rebate dependent on how much you buy. But trying to work that out is actually quite difficult, especially if you've got thousands of products. So most companies, we find, approximate the rebate at a higher level. So they might do it at product group or brand or some kind of higher level. And again, that's okay, but it's actually not accurate. It's not precise, and it's very possible that the full rebate that is due to your company is not being claimed. One thing we also find very much is supplier-fed data. So some of our clients, when we met them, didn't actually know what they buy. They've got an idea of what they buy, but at that granular level, they haven't got that kind of information available in their system. So they actually ask the supplier to log on and provide that data, let's say on a monthly basis. So this is what many companies are doing at the moment. So really, I think what we've tried to set out so far is some of the current issues and challenges in rebate management, and also some of the typical methods that we come across that people are doing now. So what I'd like to now move on to is I'd like to move on to really how DealTrack came about. And that actually takes me on to talk about another company, which is called DCS Group, which you can hopefully see in front of you. So DCS Group actually was the company that originally launched DealTrack and spun it off as a separate company. And we're talking now 16 years ago, so it was a while ago, but DCS is still a thriving business and has a close relationship with DealTrack, and geographically we're also very close together as well. So if I may, I'll tell you a short story about DCS, who have been a very fast-growing business. They started in 1994, and the business was involved in the distribution of health, beauty and household products, the types of brands that you can see in front of you now. Now, the business was started by a gentleman called Dennis C. Short, hence the name DCS, and he had a very good idea back in 94, where he saw the big brands you see in front of you and others really supplying 90% of their products to the supermarkets, and potentially struggling or not focusing on the very long tail that made up the other 10%. So Dennis basically said that he could match the buying power of the supermarkets, but only in a very narrow band of products. He could buy the stock, own the stock, and then distribute it across the country. And that was the start of DCS in 1994. And it grew very quickly, did 6 million of revenue in year one, which for a privately owned business was very good. And then by 2000, it had grown to about 40 million turnover. Today, the turnover is about 200 million, and of that, 180 million is all goods for resale, and a significant rebate income is generated. So 12 million pounds a year, that sort of level of income from suppliers is coming in. So hopefully you can see that type of business might be like some of your businesses in terms of the numbers and the kind of requirements for rebate processes. So if we just look at the climate for DCS, and again, I'm going back now to the late 90s, there were a number of challenges facing this very fast-growing business. And in the rebate space, one of the main challenges was that they were financing several £1 million of rebate at any particular time. And the reason for that was because the time between buying a product and then invoicing the supplier for rebates was a couple of months. Some of the deals were based on sales out, so they actually couldn't invoice the suppliers or even calculate what the rebates were until sales had been made. And that was costing several millions of pounds in cash flow. The deals were also quite complex. So again, although the brands value DCS in doing all the distribution, they still want complete visibility in terms of where products are being sold, and they might want to do joint business plans to drive the sale of certain products into certain customers. And rebates are used as a mechanism to do this. So certain products will attract a rebate based on who the customer is. It can also be based on sales or purchases. So in some cases, DCS will earn a rebate as soon as they buy product, but in others, they have to buy it and then sell it within a particular time frame. Deals are negotiated in different units of measure. So you might find, for example, that there are bottles, shampoo, cases of washing up powder, pallets. There's all sorts of different units of measure, and trying to keep a track on those, given that a product will appear in the accounting system in one unit of measure, and then the deal will be done in another unit of measure, was quite tricky. Also, many of the deals are tiered, so that they might get, say, 5% for the first £50,000 of purchases, and then an extra 1% for the next £200,000, and they may earn 6% right back to the first pound if they get into that second bracket, or they may not. So again, another piece of complexity. And I mentioned earlier this word waterfalls, and this is really where there's a series of deals, a string of deals attached to a supplier, and what it has to be done is the earnings from the first deal have to be deducted from the basis on which the second deal is calculated. So all of these things you can see are quite tricky to manage using spreadsheets and manual systems. Another challenge in DCS was there was a real need for an audit trail on approving these deals, because claims can be made, and later on it may be found that a particular rebate that DCS were relying on had actually not been agreed by a supplier, or let's say a supplier was disputing it, and that could be the difference between a profit and a loss. So having a clear audit trail, or I should say the lack of a clear audit trail, was a real challenge. Different suppliers wanted to be invoiced on different schedules. So one supplier wanted a monthly invoice, another one wanted a quarterly, some were calendar months, some were promotional periods which overlapped 2 calendar months. And again, trying to actually manage these different payment schedules, and critically producing the supporting information in a timely way so that suppliers can pay was really challenging. And all of that really resulted in it taking quite a long elapsed time to calculate the rebate at the end of each period. So it was taking 2 to 4 weeks to do that, depending on whether people were available to do it or who was in the business, really. The final challenge I've listed there about distributing rebates is that DCS has a number of divisions, and the rebate has to be distributed to the relevant division, which again is not necessarily straightforward. So those are some of the challenges, and what we actually ended up doing within DCS is actually building our own system, and that system has really evolved into the DealTrack that we have today, although it's been over a period of 16 years. And just to briefly talk you through what we're looking at here, on the far left-hand side, we have got master data, which will be your branches, your suppliers, your products, all being pulled in from your ERP system or set up within DealTrack. DCS then had its buyers effectively negotiating with salespeople at the suppliers and creating trading agreements. And so those trading agreements would have the rebates on them. They would go backwards and forwards. They would get signed off online through an online portal. And once they were signed off, then DCS would pull in turnover information. So that would be purchases, sales, goods received, and reconcile that. DealTrack will reconcile that with the trading agreements. So that's the power of DealTrack, is basically pulling the two together and then generating very precise calculations on what the retrospective rebate income which is due, and doing that again at that very, very low level and calculating it very precisely, and also doing it instantly, so not waiting 2 weeks after the period ends, but literally doing it straight away. That then produces a series of reports, and the reports go to DCS and also to the suppliers as well. And finally, DealTrack could actually update the DCS ledgers. So it would post invoices into the ledgers, it would post invoices to the suppliers, and it could even post accruals as well automatically, although there may need to be, or it may be an advantage to having some intervention there. So that is what we developed within DCS in 2000, and that brought with it a huge number of benefits for DCS. There was more than £200,000 of rebate which hadn't been claimed, which was missing and kind of slipping through the cracks. So that basically we got on top of, and the software immediately highlighted what that was. Also, we managed to accelerate about £1 million by a month, and that was again by producing invoices and supporting information instantly at the end of each period, rather than having to do it manually by people who've got other things to do. So that actually created more than a 10% increase in bank headroom, which was substantial, as well as saving £40,000 per year in bank interest. So literally freeing up £1 million and reducing borrowing by £1 million in total. We managed to free up 2 full-time people, and when I say free up, I mean that they were spending all of their time really just crunching numbers and trying to manually work out what the software now does, and those people were able to spend their time looking at the numbers, looking at the insight, and really working with suppliers on new ways to drive more business, so building a business for both DCS and the supplier. So all of those numbers really meant that the return on investment was very, very rapid. I mean, I've put there less than 6 months. I mean, to be honest, it was a lot less than 6 months. But you know, we obviously want to be a bit cautious in what we're saying there. And we must remember that that was a long time ago, and things have kind of moved on and improved since then further. So that really, in terms of how DealTrack came about, that really is the story. What has then happened over the last 16 years is we have spun off a new company. DCS is very entrepreneurial, and I mentioned it got to £40 million turnover from 94 to 2000, and it's now at 200 million. It's still 100% privately owned by Dennis C. Short, who is also the major shareholder in DealTrack. Mike referred to Enable at the beginning, and Enable is actually the company which we started in year 2000 to run the software business, and DealTrack is a key product and umbrella, if you like, in Enable, which is all about rebate management solutions. So really the goals of the DealTrack business are here, and this kind of relates back to some of the issues which we covered at the beginning. But the order of these changes sometimes, and achieving financial compliance is definitely now at the top, again in light of some of the news stories, and Tesco's been in the spotlight, for example, around some of this. Cash flow and profit is clearly the topic of this webinar, and hopefully you can already see examples of how we've been able to unlock significant cash flow and also actually generate more rebate income and realise the full profit potential. So those are really the main kind of objectives of DealTrack. And as we've been growing, we've been picking up a number of clients, and some of those are shown on here. So we've got 1 or 2 household names on there which you may recognise. You'll probably see that people such as Wolseley, Travis Perkins are builders merchants. Grafton are similar to that, as are Morrison Supply, who are in the United States. Landmark and Today's are both in the wholesale distribution and grocery business. So that's certainly a big sector for us, which is somewhat linked back to DCS. And also Landmark, Today's and AD are all buying groups. So this has been really kind of successful in buying groups. And we're very fortunate to have Andrew Kerwin from XL Vets on the line today. So we'll hear from him in a short while about what we've done there. So in short, in terms of DealTrack and what it does, this just gives an illustration. We have a kind of core engine in the middle there, which has got core functionality. to basically allow you to model master data. So that again is branches, suppliers, products, refunds, credits. We can also create the contracts, create the actual content of your terms agreements, your trading agreements within there. We have a whole series of different rebate mechanisms to calculate what rebate is due, and we think we've come across most of them by now. One of the reasons why our business has grown is because there are so many different types of deals that companies do, and those deal types just don't fit into the standard systems. So we've got a lot of different mechanisms. Pulling in turnover data, so again, sales, purchases, goods received, and actually calculating rebates and then reporting on that is all part of that core engine, as well as the audit logging and user permissions. And then around the outside of that engine, we're basically configuring and customizing different software to meet individual requirements. So very quickly, supplier portal is all about having suppliers log on, view deals online, sign them off, maybe enter some sales data to reconcile with your internal purchase data. And some clients already have a supplier portal, others don't. Some customers have their own dashboards and their own reporting tools like Cognos, Business Objects, Tableau, ClickView, and we integrate with those. Workflow and notifications is all about forwarding deals through an approval process, recording approvals internally and externally to your business, and it's about notifying you of opportunities. So it might be that you're approaching the next band in a particular deal, and if you buy an extra 10 cases, you'll get an extra 1%, which might be worth £100,000. So DealTrack can notify you of that. And finally, interface services are how we connect into ERP systems and pull in transactional data in an efficient way, which it does vary from one company to the next to a certain extent. In terms of the technical side, this call isn't really about going into the details of the technical approach, but all I will say is the DealTrack product does interface using modern APIs and services with a number of very common and successful systems, and it does that in a very modern way. So we have no trouble in connecting and receiving data from your various systems, which we can talk about further later on if we want to. So what I'm going to do now is very, very briefly just dip into and show you one or two views of the software. Again, I will keep this brief, but I wanted to show you that we're very passionate here about user experience design, and the software really has a consumer-grade user experience. It's like using Amazon or Google or any kind of easy-to-use software that you would be familiar with. It's accessed in a web browser. It can also be accessed on a tablet like an iPad, and permissions are applied. So we're looking here at a list of suppliers, and different users can see, different buyers, for example, can see different suppliers according to how you set up the system. We have some really personalized views for each user. So it's possible to have a task list and an inbox showing what each user needs to do. And that can also send an email to your main email system. But we've kept this really simple and easy to use, and we've rolled it out to companies where there are many hundreds, if not over 1,000 suppliers logging on regularly, and certainly hundreds of buyers within our client organizations. So really easy to use. One of the nice things about this is once you've actually created and modeled your rebate deals in DealTrack, then the software will actually generate a contract. It will generate a terms agreement to your specification. It can be designed as you want it, but it really formalizes it and puts on your trading terms and what each of the individual rebate elements are. So it will generate that for you. And of course, the whole reason why anyone would do this is to calculate rebate and also look at forecasting. And there's a number of forecasting tools built in. But what we're looking at here very briefly is for a particular deal, what the rebate is that has been earned so far. And then based on the current forecast, and there's all sorts of tools in here to manage forecasting where we think we're going to end up. And what I can very easily do is I can add on another scheme, and I can see how that one compares. So there's a range of reporting tools built in, but that really is the sort of very simple overview of the system. And again, be delighted at a further point to go into more detail if anyone is interested in that. So we're about to hear from Andrew Kerwin, and to kind of conclude the sort of my piece of this webinar, then I wanted to just explain from a return on investment perspective. We find that where companies have either a turnover of more than £250 million or rebate income of 12.5 million, which is 5%, then we found the return is very rapid and typically less than 6 months. Appreciate that in some organisations 5% rebate is very light and they'll get much more than 5%, and in other industries perhaps they get less. But I think where there is a company turning over £250 million or more, it's a very rapid return. Where the company is turning over 100 million, then the return on investment is slightly longer, typically, and perhaps it's more like 6 to 12 months rather than 0 to 6 months. But again, it does vary. So I think where rebate income is £5 million a year, then we found that this has been a very worthwhile investment. Perhaps it is less than that, it may be questionable. So how we break that down, and this is based on working with a number of existing clients, is we're typically finding rebate that was not claimed before. This comes back to the profit opportunity and really kind of increasing profit. So typically we're finding at least 2% of rebate where deals have been agreed, but they're simply not being claimed in full. Additional rebate is really the opportunities. It is the additional rebate you could earn if you have the tools to negotiate the deal and see opportunities for building sales and increasing sales for both the supplier and your company. We've talked a bit about reducing bank interest already, and that really largely depends on, first of all, how much borrowing the company has, if any, and also on how long it's financing this rebate for. You know, is it a month on average, or 6 months, or 12 months? So that has a range there. I've said that we're typically finding 2 to 5% rebate not being claimed, but one of our clients actually found £15 million within a couple of months of implementing DealTrack because DealTrack identified these particular claims that had never been previously made. So those numbers are often quite conservative. And again, to give a sense of scale, what we're finding is, let's imagine we're finding 2% that hasn't been claimed, we're finding another 2% additional, so 4% additional rebate in total. Then 1% of that pays for DealTrack, and 3% is obviously going straight to your bottom line. Obviously, there's a whole range of soft benefits as well, which are not specifically looking at return on hard financials, but that tends to be the type of rule of thumb.
So many thanks, Andrew, for that, and I hope that was of value to you. I'd now like to pass over to Andrew Kerwin, who is a customer of DealTrack. His company is XL Vets, and I'll leave Andrew to introduce XL Vets and some of the experience he's had. Andrew.
Good morning, Mike, and good morning, everybody. So thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you in this area. We're a collective, collaborative community of 52 independent veterinary practices spread the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. Just to give you some orders of magnitude, within those 52 practices, there are 750 veterinary surgeons working. And we buy a considerable amount of materials, principally medicines, through a wholesaler network, but also dealing with the primary pharmaceutical companies. Our purchases are in the tens of millions of pounds per year, and we have direct relationships with about 25 major supplier companies. So I hope that that just gives you a flavour for the dimensions with which we're working. Mike, are you able to give me the next slide? Thank you. So the challenges that we faced as an organisation really revolve around pretty much everything Andrew's already said. Certainly, we had multiple disparate systems that were in place. We were using a whole mixture of one of the earlier yellow slides, paper, email, supplier data-led initiatives as well. So we lacked central libraries. We lacked the ability to be able to demonstrate to our members how these all interlinked. And we also were expending a considerable amount of time in terms of centralized calculations, particularly where those became increasingly complex with linked deals. So I would really say that everything that's been said was certainly our experiences. Mike, if we could go to the next slide. So we've been working with DealTrack now for between 8 and 9 years. It's been a developing partnership approach. One of the things that I've been particularly impressed with is the way that they have understood the complexity of our business. Clearly, everybody thinks their own industry is unique, and in some ways it is. But of course, the reality is that there's nothing new under the sun, and all of the complexities that we see in our own marketplaces are actually shared in other markets. But it's been a very effective partnership that has really got to the root of understanding what our needs have been as an organisation, and then extremely effectively delivering that through a very well-ordered project management process. Really clear functional specifications have been prepared before we've gone forward with the implementation of software. And those functional specifications have not only ensured that we've really been precise about what it is we're trying to achieve, but also it's given us the opportunity to reflect on our own practices and even do some sort of back calculation of reverse engineering to change the way that we've done things for the better. The long and short of it is that by implementing these systems, we have brought order to a degree of chaos. And it's been through automation of that process that we've achieved these things. Mike, if we could have the next slide. So what have we actually seen in terms of benefits? Well, they've been considerable, and I would certainly support what Andrew was saying in terms of the return on investment numbers, in terms of how to measure that in hard, cold cash, both in terms of missed rebate, both in terms of speed of rebate reprocessing and cash flow. There have been some other things as well, which is that it has given us a considerable increase in the credibility with our suppliers. For example, it was not normal within our industry to start every meeting with an analysis of margin. And the system has allowed us to automate that and really bring a rigor and a discipline to that relationship. It's certainly changed the way that we work with our suppliers, such that we are leading it now in a way that they previously were leading it more. And the automation has also led to saving man time, human resource time. We've talked about the savings of elapsed time in terms of rebate repayment. And certainly it has allowed us to expand and be more creative in terms of how we are working with our suppliers. So I hope that that gives you some customer-centric view of what for us has been a really important development in the way that we run our business. And certainly we would be very happy to recommend the DealTrack system to anybody who was looking at this within their own business process.
Andrew, many thanks for that. That's brilliant. Many thanks for your time. We do have a few more minutes left on the webinar. So if you do have any questions, you can use the question pane to send them through. Andrew Kerwin, there's a couple of questions that came through. What are the top three things you felt you needed to do to get the project started? And I appreciate it was 8 or 9 years ago, but it would be useful just to share those thoughts, please.
Okay, so there was a need for a sort of a clarity of need, I think, Mike. You know, the first one was to, you know, you're implementing a change, aren't you, where people had been doing things in a particular way. So we really needed to get people to buy into the new world order of things. We needed to be able to work with some of our suppliers to provide information in various formats that they'd not previously done. And we specifically needed to make the investment in terms of skill sets within our team to be able to harness that new way of working. So it's some fairly basic change management stuff. Once people started to see the system in operation, it was very easy. People got it very quickly.
Great, thank you for that. We've had another question come in. I think this is for you, Andrew Butt. A question come in. DealTrack appears to be focused on rebates coming in, but can it also be used for rebates we pay out to customers?
Sure, thanks, Mike. So the short answer is yes. As you correctly say, this webinar has been more focused on the process of claiming rebates from suppliers. But you might remember at the beginning, I talked about contract support, where typically it's all about helping customers to sell more and incentivizing sales by actually offering customer rebates or kind of special contract support opportunities to customers. So yes, that is something we've been involved in. I know within DCS they actually have everything linked together. So rebates are earned from suppliers and paid out to customers in some of the cases. But we've also got experience working with customers who are only interested in managing rebates that they pay out. So that's certainly something we'd be happy to explore further after this webinar.
Okay. Another question for you, Andrew Kerwin. You mentioned involving your suppliers. How easy was it to get your suppliers and members to buy into using the system?
Fairly straightforward, Mike, to be honest with you. I would say that one of the things that always surprises me is that even when you're dealing with very large supplying companies that are multinational, you can sometimes be slightly incredulous about their inability to be able to handle data and have proper process management in place, even though they may be running themselves big ERP systems. But we've certainly been able to work with them. And again, I think that goes back to that point of increasing the customer credibility with the supplier by actually helping them improve their systems as well through that sort of that reverse engineering that I talked about earlier by sharing best practice. So we've had one or two challenges with getting people to be able to work with us in this way, but they've been very much the minority.
Right, thank you for that. Another question that's come in, is this more appropriate for a buying group rather than members of a group, Andrew?
So, yeah, good question. I think it really all depends on size. And so our clients, we have got some buying groups, and in some ways, Excel Vets does have a group buying capability as part of what it is. So, I think that's certainly a big focus for us. But we also have plenty of companies who are not groups, and they just have quite significant buying power in their own right. So we have implemented DealTrack for members of the buying group, but they would tend to be relatively large members with quite a lot of spend in their own right. Whilst it would definitely work for maybe a smaller member or a member with a lower amount of purchases, then the return on investment may not be so compelling.
Right. We've got some time now for maybe the last question, and which is the examples given seem to focus primarily on purchase data. Have you examples where this is not available, i.e., where customers order, e.g., services from suppliers?
Sure. So yeah, it's a good point that calculating the rebate at the most granular level does have some dependency on purchase data being available. But I did mention earlier that supplier-fed data is something which does go on, and where we're working with a client where they simply don't have the granularity of purchase data or sales data or whatever data, transaction data, let's call it, then they are still getting suppliers to actually log into the supplier portal and feed in the kind of transactional data. And that can be purchase data, it can be sales data, it can be goods received data, it can be any basis for the rebates that is relevant to your business.
That's brilliant. Well, we've come to the end of the webinar, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And I do appreciate, Andrew Cohen, your time in talking about some of your experiences. The webinar has been recorded, and we will be distributing that to all of the attendees, all those who have registered. Hugh McHugh is the main contact here at DealTrack, and I'm sure Hugh can provide you with any more information should you wish to follow this up. So Hugh's details are on the screen. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and have a good day.